For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon has called in the National Guard to restore order in Ferguson. The St. Louis suburb has seen more than a week of protests following the killing of an unarmed 18-year-old by police. Michael Brown was killed by Ferguson police on August 9th. Witnesses say Brown had his arms raised when Officer Darren Wilson shot him 6 times. Last week, Governor Nixon ordered a state of emergency in Ferguson, imposing a curfew. Nightly protests have continued in violation of the curfew, resulting in several arrests. One person remains in critical condition after being shot during the demonstrations. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder has approved a second autopsy to be performed on Brown's body. And recapping the events in Ferguson, on August 9th, Brown and a friend are confronted by an officer as they walk back to Brown's home from a convenience store. Following an argument with the officer, Brown is shot and killed. After a candlelight vigil on August 10th, protesters denouncing the death clash with police. On August 11th, 2 men tell investigators that Brown had his hands raised when the officer approached with his weapon drawn and fired repeatedly. That night, police in riot gear fired tear gas and rubber bullets in an attempt to disperse a crowd. Protests and scuffles with police continue for several days. On August 14th, the head of the Missouri Highway Patrol takes control of security in Ferguson. The next day, Ferguson police identify the officer who shot Brown as 28-year-old Darren Wilson, a 6-year veteran of the force. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon declares a state of emergency and imposes a curfew in Ferguson on August 16th. People in Ferguson defied the curfew, leading to 7 arrests and 1 person shot. And just today, results of the autopsy ordered by Brown's family confirmed the young man was shot 6 times, including twice in the head. And moving on, with the 5-day ceasefire between Israeli and Palestinian officials set to expire on Monday, reports from the ongoing peace negotiations suggest a deal may not be reached by the midnight deadline. An unnamed Palestinian official says Israel has retreated from what had already been achieved and that discussions have returned to square one. The official says that the Palestinians will review the situation and issue a response. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Palestinians that they will face harsh strikes if rocket fire into Israel resumes. According to the United Nations, 425,000 people in the Gaza Strip have been displaced by the assault, in addition to the nearly 2,000 Palestinians killed. And on Monday, Israeli troops demolished the homes of 2 Palestinians suspected responsible for the abduction and killing of 3 Israeli teenagers in June. Troops destroyed the homes in the southern West Bank before dawn, despite attempts by the local population to impede the Israeli soldiers. Palestinian children hung Hamas flags on the houses. Israel accuses Hamas of the abduction and murder of 3 Jewish seminary students. The students went missing on June 12th and were discovered dead a couple weeks later in the West Bank. Hamas denies responsibility. The killings also led to revenge attacks, including the murder of a 16-year-old Palestinian by Israeli extremists. Tens of thousands of Brazilians gathered on Sunday in the northeastern city of Recife to bid farewell to presidential candidate Eduardo Campos. Campos died in a plane crash Wednesday. Locals waited hours in line to pay their respects and observe an open-air mass. A number of high-level Brazilian officials attended, including President Dilma Rousseff and her predecessor, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. It remains uncertain how Campos' death will affect the October election. Uruguayan Foreign Minister Luis Almagro has confirmed the transfer of 6 Guantanamo Bay detainees to Uruguay. Almagro says that the prisoners may also bring their families. Uruguay has offered the prisoners residency, with officials there saying it would be virtually impossible for the prisoners to return to their home countries. The government of Jose Mujica has consulted with other intelligence agencies and determined that the 6 prisoners do not pose a risk to the country. Leopoldo Lopez, the coordinator of Venezuela's conservative Popular Will political party, remains in jail. He has been locked up since February 18th, facing accusations of public instigation of violence, arson, hate speech, damage to public property, and association to commit crime. The charges come following a wave of violent protests in February, which led to the deaths of 43 Venezuelans. Now his trial date is quickly approaching.
In what will be one of the most high-profile legal cases to take place in Venezuela in recent years, the trial of jailed Venezuelan opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez will now go ahead on the 28th of August. While proceedings were meant to begin this week against the former mayor, the trial was delayed for a third time due to problems surrounding the submission of evidence. The political leader is being prosecuted alongside 3 student leaders for his role in the violent barricades which rocked the country earlier in the year and which led to the deaths of 43 Venezuelans. Back in February, Lopez's supporters mounted blockades across main roads in various cities, denying residents access to food, gas and water, and even emergency medical services, with ambulances refused passage by the barricaders. They were responding to Lopez's calls in the media to force the exit of the socialist government of Nicolás Maduro.
Usted, señor Maduro.
No matter what you do, Mr. Maduro, this that has begun will not stop till the change is achieved.
At the centre of this prominent case is a debate over freedom of expression in the country, with Lopez's defence lawyers arguing that he was simply exercising his constitutional right to freedom of speech. Yet many, such as constitutional law expert Jesus Silva, think that Lopez prioritised his political ambitions over the lives of ordinary citizens.
He kept on calling for more protest, so he knew the result that was coming, but he didn't care about it, and he kept on calling for more protest and boosting violence.
With the date of the trial now set, with no further delays possible, the 28th of August will see this debate played out in the capital's principal courthouse. Rachel Boothroyd, Telesur, Caracas, Venezuela.
Thanks to Rachel. Moving on, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange says he plans to leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he has been in exile for over 2 years. Assange says the move will happen soon, but he hasn't explained why or when. Accompanied by Ecuador's Foreign Minister Ricardo Patiño, Assange denied rape charges against him in Sweden. Assange says his health is suffering due to a lack of sunlight. He also criticized the policing surveillance expense undertaken by the UK to watch him. In Germany today, mediated talks between Russia and Ukraine overcame certain hurdles, but a ceasefire between the Ukrainian military and eastern rebels was rejected. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called on the United States to pressure Kiev into stopping what he called a war between brothers. Officials say progress has been reached regarding humanitarian aid, with Russian donations set to reach the civilian victims in eastern Ukraine this week. The EU announces it will provide over $165 million to European fruit and vegetable growers. It's an attempt to combat losses following Russia's counter-sanctions. Russia responded to EU and U.S. sanctions by banning agricultural goods from Europe and North America. The EU exports nearly $16 billion in agricultural goods to Russia yearly. Russia hopes to import foods from various countries, including a number in Latin America, to make up for the banned imports. EU officials hope to convince Latin American countries to not increase exports to Russia.
€5 million.
After calling for a revolution over the weekend, Pakistani cricketer turned politician Imran Khan today announced his party will resign its seats in the National Assembly. He hopes to force Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to step down. Khan's party holds 34 out of 342 seats in the National Assembly. Khan has accused Sharif of cronyism and corruption. Flooding and mudslides in Nepal over the weekend left over 150 people dead. Some mountain communities have been left completely isolated. Thousands of rescued people have been relocated to schools and other public buildings. This year's monsoon rains have been the deadliest in the landlocked nation since 2002. Sri Lankan cricket star Maila Haywardiye has announced his retirement, ending a 17-year Test career. Jayawardene was widely regarded as one of cricket's foremost batsmen, racking up nearly 12,000 runs and 149 tests. He also led his country to second place in the 2007 Cricket World Cup. Cricket is the world's second most popular sport with some 2 to 3 billion fans around the planet.
Something that I have been thinking about for some time.
Did you know that? More on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English for Telesur English. I'm Cody Weddle.